the heir who refused the script. He was born into a future already written, a life mapped by tradition long before it could speak. Every step was planned, every role assigned, every expectation quietly enforced. But somewhere between obedience and destiny, he made a decision that would unsettle an entire royal order. To understand why this moment matters today, we must look at how power is usually passed down, not through choice, but through repetition. Dynasties survive by following scripts refined over centuries, scripts designed to eliminate uncertainty. Yet in a world changing faster than tradition can adapt, those scripts can become cages. And when one heir dares to question them, the consequences ripple far beyond a single life. From childhood, he was taught how to lead without ever being asked who he wanted to become. Lessons came in discipline, restraint, and silence. He learned when to speak, when to wait, and when to hide doubt behind confidence. The palace praised his precision, his ability to perform the role flawlessly. But perfection came at a cost few acknowledged: the quiet erosion of choice. The first crack appeared during a private briefing meant to prepare him for the next phase of his ascent. Advisors spoke of alliances, appearances, and obligations, outlining years of his future as if reading from an unchangeable ledger. As he listened, a realization settled in with uncomfortable clarity. None of them were asking if he agreed. None of them believed refusal was possible. That was the moment he understood the truth. The script was not guidance. It was control. And for the first time in his life, he wondered what would happen if he simply didn't follow it. The realization did not arrive as rebellion. It arrived as silence. A pause inside him that grew heavier with every conversation. Every directive delivered as destiny rather than discussion. He began noticing how often decisions were presented as inevitabilities, how frequently tradition was used to end debate rather than guide it. The script he saw now was not meant to be questioned, only executed. As weeks passed, the pressure intensified. Advisors accelerated their briefings, layering obligation upon obligation. As the speed could outrun doubt, schedules filled, expectations tightened. And yet, beneath the rhythm of duty, his unease sharpened into awareness. He wasn't resisting leadership. He was resisting erasure. He tested the boundaries carefully at first. A delayed response. A question asked where none was expected. A suggestion framed not as defiance, but as curiosity. Each small deviation sent ripples through the palace. Advisors exchanged glances. Elders followed up with reminders. It became clear how fragile the system truly was, how dependent it was on unquestioned compliance. The conflict surfaced openly during a strategy session meant to finalize his public role. The agenda was meticulous, rehearsed, and absolute. When his turn came to acknowledge it, he hesitated. Not long enough to appear uncertain, but long enough to signal intention. Then he spoke a single sentence that unsettled the room. What happens if this path no longer fits the future we're entering? The reaction was immediate. Silence first, then tension, then polite resistance framed as concern. He was reminded of legacy, stability, responsibility. The familiar pillars of tradition rose like walls around him. But something had shifted. For the first time, the script had been interrupted. After the meeting, warnings arrived quietly. Not threats, but advice. Patience, they urged. Timing. Perspective. Yet beneath every word lay the same message: fall back in line. Instead, he withdrew into reflection. He studied the history of those who came before him, not for instruction, but for patterns. He noticed how often innovation was delayed until crisis forced it. How many leaders had followed tradition faithfully only to be remembered for what they failed to change? And slowly, a conviction formed that would no longer be silenced. The conflict was no longer internal. It had entered the open, and the choice ahead would determine whether he became another heir who preserved the script, or the one who finally rewrote it. The pressure that followed was relentless, though never loud. Expectations tightened through quiet adjustments rather than open confrontation. Invitations were rerouted. Advisors shifted his calendar without explanation. Conversations grew more guarded, as if the palace itself were testing whether his hesitation was temporary or something far more dangerous. He sensed the system closing ranks. Those who believed the script was sacred began to act, not as adversaries, but as caretakers of tradition, convinced they were protecting him from himself. They reminded him of public perception, of the fragile balance between authority and uncertainty. They spoke of the people's need for continuity, never mentioning his need for truth. And in doing so, they revealed the heart of the conflict. Stability had become more important than sincerity. The turning point came during a closed-door session with senior elders. There, the script was no longer implied. It was enforced. They outlined his future in precise detail, framing it as both honor and obligation. When he raised concerns, they listened politely, then dismissed him as growing pains. One elder finally said what the others implied. The role was larger than his preferences. That sentence sharpened everything. He realized the debate was not about readiness or wisdom. It was about control, about whether leadership was meant to evolve with the individual who carried it, or remain frozen in the image of those who came before. And in that moment, he understood that silence would be interpreted as surrender. He responded calmly, but with finality. He told them he would fulfill his duties, but not blindly. He would no longer accept decisions presented without dialogue. The script, he said, would be reviewed, questioned, and adapted to the world they were preparing to lead. The room fell quiet. Some elders bristled. Others studied him with new interest. A few recognized the shift for what it was, the emergence of a leader no longer defined by obedience. The palace, once confident in its authority over him, now faced uncertainty it had not planned for. In the days that followed, rumors spread beyond the council walls. Some painted him as impatient. Others whispered that he was dangerous. But among younger officials and advisors, something else stirred: recognition. They saw in him a reflection of the questions they had never been permitted to ask. The conflict was no longer contained within private chambers. It had begun to reshape the internal balance of power. And as lines quietly redrew themselves, he understood that refusing the script was not a single act. It was a sustained position, one that would demand resolve, patience, and the willingness to stand alone long enough for others to find their courage too. The moment arrived not with drama, but with clarity. A formal address had been scheduled, one designed to reaffirm continuity, reassure allies, and present him as the flawless extension of tradition. The words had been prepared, the cadence rehearsed. All he had to do was repeat the script, and the tension would dissolve. Instead, he paused. That pause, brief, deliberate, became the climax of everything he'd been wrestling with. Then he spoke, not to reject the past, but to redefine its purpose. He acknowledged the legacy he had inherited, the discipline it demanded, and the stability it had created. But he also spoke of a world no longer shaped by certainty alone, a world that required leaders who could adapt without losing their center. He made one thing unmistakably clear. Tradition would guide him, but it would no longer govern him. The reaction was immediate and restrained, yet seismic. Some elders stiffened, recognizing the shift they could no longer prevent. Others listened in silence, realizing resistance now carried its own risk. What unsettled them most was not his defiance, but his composure. He was not rebelling. He was assuming authorship of his role. In the days that followed, the palace adjusted. Slowly, carefully, certain advisors withdrew. Others stepped forward. Conversations changed tone. Decisions once made without consultation now required discussion. The script had not been burned, but had been rewritten line by line in real time. The resolution was not a victory parade. It was something quieter, more durable. He had not overthrown the system. He had shifted its center. And in doing so, he created space for himself and for those who would come after him. Standing alone one evening, overlooking the city shaped by generations before him, he understood the cost of his choice. Resistance would continue. Tradition would push back. But the path forward was finally his to walk with intention, not inheritance alone. Refusing the script did not make him less of an heir. It made him a leader, subscribed to join the journey. The